One thing that I love about this work, and I think is a big part of this supplier-facing responsibility, is taking all those interactions we have with suppliers and digesting them to share with our internal teams.
Well, you have like the short-term business goals and also the long-term, right? And you're talking about from here, right? To say this is where we're going. How do you stay organized with all this short-term?
There's definitely a lot that we're keeping up with. And, it's funny, I just mentioned this to someone the other day, is that, the function of these roles, the project management has become so much more important than ever.
Is there any key lessons you have learned by working with suppliers? Because even though you're saying DigiKey is great, and DigiKey is great, but again, it's always good to have that partnership and then learn from suppliers.
Oh, absolutely. That's the key to it, right? Is being able to learn from each other. I think being really open in how you communicate and build trust with each other. That's really big for me. I see every moment, both big and small, as an opportunity to learn from each other, right? What's important to you? What's important to me? How can we provide more solutions? I'm really encouraged with how some of those skills are being, demonstrated now. And then it's about, empowering people to continue to come up with more ideas and recognize that they're embracing these kind of technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if my sarcasm would catch well with some of the technology that's in place today.
You should do a test. Yeah, you should do a test, right? And say, This is if it really believes what I'm saying, and this is when it understands, what I'm actually saying.
Exactly. It keeps putting more fuel in the flame, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, it has to be fun, right?
Yes.
That's what I love within this industry. That has to be, and every day has to be a little bit different, I think.
Yes. I mean, I guess 15 years ago, I would have said go for the electronic components industry because it has been such a great fit. But that's not probably what you're looking for.
You are listening to Leadership in Manufacturing podcast. I'm your host, Sannah Vinding. I'm a strategic leader with over 20 years of experience in B2B marketing, product development, and team empowerment. I'm passionate about sharing insights and tools to help professionals enhance their leadership skills. In each episode, we discuss relevant topics for leaders like you, offering practical strategies, valuable insights, and all this is to help you refine your leadership style and drive success in your role. I interview professionals within the manufacturing industry and the distribution sector, and they all share their knowledge around leadership, and you will learn a lot. Make sure to follow us, like, and subscribe, and check out our YouTube channel or the website. So just search for Leadership in Manufacturing. Welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you're here. And today I had the pleasure of speaking with Heather Fulara. She's the Vice President of Interconnect, Electromechanical and Industrial Automation at DigiKey. She has over 15 years of experience in the electronics component distribution, and she's known for her expertise in marketing, international business, and also building high-performing teams. She's committing to strengthen supplier partnership, developing new talent, and also driving growth through digital strategies. I want to make sure you're listening to this episode because you will learn a lot. We discussed the supplier partnership. What does it mean to have a good supplier partnership? Look for the trends, right? Make sure you bring it back. Have that collaboration between the supplier and the distributor. Another one was leading through rapid technology change. All of the AI, how do you handle it? What do you do? What is the best way to go forward? I also asked her, what's the difference between being a good leader and a great leader? And you want to hear her answer. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Remember to subscribe. Enjoy. So welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you for having me, Sannah. I'm glad to be here.
It's good. We had to reschedule a few times, but we have it now. So I'm excited. Yeah, we were.
It's happening.
Playing a little bit of ping pong, but we're here today. So yes. I always love to start the show asking, and everybody I have on the show, what excites you about the electronics industry?
This is an awesome industry to be a part of in the perfect time, right? I think for me, I've been very lucky to be supplier facing in this industry. And so for me, what gets me so excited is being able to interact with hundreds of supplier partners and being able to learn what's important to them, get their perspective on what's trending, what they're trying to get ahead of, and hopefully be a part of that, right? Our proposition should support whatever it is that they're, moving forward with. And I feel that that's happening more and more, that the more we learn about what they're developing and what, how their plan to execute, DigiKey's strategy aligns with that more and more. So it keeps putting more fuel in the flame, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, it has to be fun, right?
Yes.
That's what I love within this industry. There has to be, and every day has to be a little bit different, I think.
Yes.
So
absolutely. No doubt.
Your distributors actually bring that back to you, right? That makes it different. No.
Yes, exactly.
So let's dive into some leadership here. So how has your leadership journey or your leadership style changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, certainly. I started in the industry as a product manager and then started leading global teams by technology and whatnot. And, I think that my style has certainly changed from the beginning when, I felt like I was alongside so many people that had decades worth of experience. And I felt like there was a lot of asking questions, a lot of, digesting things at the beginning. But the more, interactions I had openly with the suppliers, right, that really helped me gain a lot of knowledge and experience that, really helped change, my perspective as I, went on to leading teams. And I think now it's all about, how do we stay ahead of the curve? How do we continue to learn and ask more questions, and really get a view of the supplier's strategy so that we can make sure our offering supports that. So I think now it's, coming off of the high of EDS, it's about how do we provide more solutions? How do we become even more important to our supplier partners? And how do we solve operational, effectiveness, how do we solve efficiencies there? But then also, how do we bring more data into that conversation and help provide more information that will help them influence what other investments they're making in their business? So I think that's really just that trend has really changed over time. And that's really what our team is focused on creating in all of these different interactions.
Yeah. It takes a lot, right? So you have like the short-term business goals and also the long-term, right? And you're talking about that from here, right? To say this is where we're going. How do you stay organized with all this short-term?
There's definitely a lot that we're keeping up with. And, it's funny, I just mentioned this to someone the other day, is that, the function of these roles, the project management has become so much more important than ever, right? If we make these commitments in the meetings with our suppliers, we must fulfill them, right? That's part of how we maintain trust and build those relationships, is following through on those commitments. And so making sure that we're swiftly actioning what we committed to last week and set up the call, keep it going. Where's the action plan by supplier? And, we've got a format that works for us where we really check in on our suppliers around the levers that grow any one of these relationships, right? And being able to have those check-ins where we, look at those levers together and say, are we on the right track? But then also, what are the actions we're driving? What barriers do we need to knock down together? And how do we keep that pace? It is faster than ever. And, lately... Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, with you saying it's going faster, I have the same feeling. It's going like faster and faster and faster. And have to stay organized, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise, if you don't, I know if I'm suddenly cheating a little bit on my notes and put them somewhere else, I'm like, right, where do I find it? Where instead of I've spent that 30 seconds or that minute of organizing it up front.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting. Sorry, I have a dog barking in the background. Can you hear that?
I have here as well. Don't worry. That is only making it more human. Don't worry.
Sorry.
We all need to speak up. It's okay.
Yes. Okay. But, it's interesting because everyone has different ways in which they take notes, digest them, get them out to, the owner, if, or move them forward themselves. And I think that's where, we're kind of at this crux of using these AI tools in addition to our own. It was interesting. I was at the Memorial Day parade for my town, and a neighbor had asked what I'd been up to, and I shared what EDS is like, which made his eyes boggle. Like, wait, how many meetings? And he asked me, are folks using AI software to record and capture actions? And I didn't have one meeting where that happened, but yet I would imagine that's part of our future, right? That's at some point, it's already active on Teams that folks are using this add-on, but, in terms of face-to-face meetings, I think it happens often in customer interactions, but not quite in the EDS format that we're in today.
And that's also, I think, the balance of, right, when you meet at EDS, I always call it it's like the speed dating of business meetings, right?
Yes.
That hour, right? And you just have to go fast.
Yes.
But it's also like connecting and being personal. And sometimes you don't want that AI, even though I'm sure everything they know about you anyway, but you don't want to record something if it's more on the personal side. I think that's the balance that it hasn't happened yet. Maybe somebody are using it. But it's to find, I think it's to find the right level of it, right? How to use it.
For sure. What's the balance, right? Yeah, I don't know if my sarcasm would catch well with some of the technology that's in place today.
You should do a test. Yeah, you should do a test, right? And saying, this is if it really believes what I'm saying, and this is when it understands, what I'm actually saying.
Exactly.
That would be good. So I want to talk about your leadership style and within your team, right? Because again, we have to learn all these skill set. And also when we just touch on AI, how do you make sure that you are actually guiding and showing and mentoring the right way? And how do you do it? If you have an example, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a combination of things. When I think about, the crux of where we're at right now, in terms of AI, right? I see certain skills really shining, which is very fun. When you think about like curiosity, folks that are interested in researching some of these tools, understanding the capability of AI, and also taking a look at our kind of tech stack, like all the third-party technologies that we partner with and how they're integrating AI, it helps people understand what's possible, right? So I think constantly looking for those opportunities to learn about the technologies and experiment with it, but then also becoming adaptable enough to say, how can that live in our world, right? So we've got data that we digest. There's data that could be generated by AI that could validate that data or potentially be, a new bit of logic for us to look at and make decisions off of. But that's really where I see folks shining, is looking at where can I find a home for this data and how do I build logic for that then kicks off an action, right? So it's not, the point isn't to just have more data for us to be reviewing.
Yeah, right. Drown in data.
Right. It's allowing us to potentially look at what we're doing today and what bogs us down so that we can make faster decisions and make room for more strategy. And I think that's where openly DigiKey is a great environment for that. We love to play around in that gray area and try to figure out what's next and what partner, could we align with on that project that, might be a little clunky at the beginning. We need a guinea pig so we can kind of test out this new idea and whatnot. But then once it hits, we can potentially roll it out to hundreds of other suppliers. And then how could that impact what we do on our day-to-day in those interactions? So I'm really encouraged with how some of those skills are being, demonstrated now. And then it's about, empowering people to continue to come up with more ideas and recognize that they're embracing these kind of technologies.
Yeah. And I'm sure you also have to, because there's a lot of data, right? And you can't every data point. But it will take, forever. But I'm sure, what you have before and what you're having now and where you're going, you also have to clean out and saying, maybe we looked at these data points in the past, but now because we have other available data, right? You can look at everything in a new way and then still clean it up and be more simple about and saying, here are the reports.
Absolutely. I think it is about like almost qualifying different pieces of data, right? Here's our own internal, here's potentially external, and here is AI generated, right? And how do those bits of data, how important are each of those to the decision being made? So, this is new territory, but it's really fun. I mean, being able to say like, how we can use all of this. DigiKey is never short of data. So this is right in our wheelhouse, right? So I think it leads to some really exciting supplier collaborations on how we can use it differently.
Yeah, no, I like that. Hey, I'm just pausing the episode for a few seconds because I want to make sure that you know we have a newsletter. So sign up on leadershipinmanufacturing.com and we send out when there's a new episode, if we have some news or if we have a new blog. So sign up today. Back to the episode. I want to touch a little bit about suppliers. So is there any key lessons you have learned by working with suppliers? Because even though you're saying DigiKey is great and DigiKey is great, but again, it's always good to have that partnership and then learn from suppliers.
Oh, absolutely. That's the key to it, right? Is being able to learn from each other. I think being really open in how you communicate and build trust with each other. That's really big for me. I see every moment, both big and small, as an opportunity to learn from each other, right? What's important to you? What's important to me? How can we provide more solutions?
Yeah.
I aim to be really open and transparent to understand what those needs are so that, folks can feel that we can, innovate together and potentially if there's a barrier, let's talk about it so that we can get to the other side. One thing that I love about this work and I think is a big part of this supplier facing responsibility is taking all those interactions we have with suppliers and digesting them to share with our internal teams, right? Yeah. So, you think about, what our email team has got going. If I understand what they're piloting and innovating, then I can advocate when I'm in a supplier. So I can ask about how that aligns with their strategy. Similarly, if I hear a trend in a supplier meeting, it's good for me to give that email team a heads up about what it is I'm hearing a lot, right? Yeah. So that part, I think that's one of the reasons why I love this, is because we are able to help our internal teams grow at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about being transparent as well and having that communication flow back and forward, right?
Yes, exactly. And we do that through a number of different ways. I think that, update calls internally so that we can understand what the priorities are of each team are very important. It helps us to knowledge share and understand, but then encouraging that folks, set up those one-to-one meetings where they don't quite understand what was presented, or maybe there was a question that came up that, wasn't, familiar, right? Yeah. I encourage folks, and I do it myself, hey, can I just have 15 minutes to talk to you about what it was that you were explaining, or maybe even, a point you made that I don't know if I agree with. I'd love to learn more about it so that, I can go into the next meeting, just more educated, right? So I think, again, it keeps kind of coming back to where we are around continuing to learn.
Yeah, I like that. I like, especially to lean in as well, right? And saying, hey, just have a conversation about it. I think sometimes there's always emails, right? They will not disappear.
Yes.
But you can read them or understand them differently with emails.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can get misunderstand really easy as well. So I think having the human touch that you're just saying, right? Having that, even if it's a call on Teams, right? Or if it's actually in person, face to face.
Yes.
It's helped so much more of having a much better communication and understanding going forward, right?
Yeah, I do think I kind of see some of that changing with email lately, where it's instead of I'm going to email this big, long, request or, position, let's just set up the call to talk through it. And that's probably going to get better buy-in at the end, right? Is because you're going to have a chance for everybody to voice their, opinions and hopefully knock down any barriers right on the spot. And that kind of nods back to just the pace of work that we have these days.
Yeah. Yeah. And also maybe take away some of the clutter, right? If you have emails before you have that meeting,
right?
Have the meeting.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's get it on the schedule. Which, I remember supplier meetings years ago. Okay, great. Yeah, this is a good conversation. Let's talk about this at our next QBR, or let's talk about this. It's now it's let's talk about this next week.
Or maybe you should have a pre-meeting before the QBR, so you took care of all that. Then, right? But you need to be more concentrating about what's happening at the QBR.
Yeah, I think it is. I feel that we are more direct and productive in these, meetings because of that. I think that is kind of the trend of where things are going, which, I think that's a good thing for us to kind of get right to it and be able to act as quickly as possible. Even, the format of the EDS meetings, there were several meetings where, oh, well, let me just message this person on Teams. I'll get an answer right now, instead of let's take an action. I'll send you the answer next week.
Let me dial up on the phone. No.
Exactly.
No. So, okay, I want to know, because there's so much going on, we're saying, right, with the speed and what's happening and AI. So how do you learn?
Yeah, I think that it's ongoing. I try to lead by example when it comes to learning. I share my own experiences and encourage folks to do the same where they'd like to develop. But when it comes to it kind of depends, right? If we're talking about more of a mentorship conversation or my involvement with a Spark program, sometimes there are courses that are part of that recommendation, right? If someone wants to lean in on a functional expertise or an area they want to grow in to position themselves and establish more credibility in an area, right? But I do think the way that we work today, there is a lot of opportunity for those like daily routines to be learning opportunities. And so, when we have our team huddle, it's about, part of my responsibility is making sure like, okay, we've started hearing this in meetings. Are you hearing this in this area? What trends are being talked about? And I think it's more about, what should we be asking about? What are you being asked about? Openly, our suppliers can ask us literally anything in a meeting, right? So it's like we do need to be prepared and know what is evolving in our proposition and what it is that we need to be preparing for. So that keeps our team informed and engaged when we share what we're learning, as part of our cross-functional projects and that kind of thing. But then also bringing in those cross-functional teammates so that we can both learn about what their priorities are and also establish that connection. I think part of the pace in which we're working today and how we're constantly trying to innovate is it's not as much about being in the meeting and bringing up the great idea and then that's it. Most of the time it's bring up the great idea that you hopefully have talked to your cross-functional partner and get a feel for, is this work we're doing? Is this work we want to do? Is this, that kind of thing. So it's both the questions and the initiative of moving forward. So I think a lot of, whether it's in a group or it's engaging in that kind of the solo conversation, I think that that's all about using all those moments like big and small as learning opportunities.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's all about asking the questions, right? And be able to listen as well, not just ask and then like, whatever you are.
Yes. And kind of like, where's the follow-up from it, right? That, if it's an area you want to grow, then, okay, well, let's set up a meeting, have a meeting separately with that person who's the expert in that area and get close to the SMEs as part of your network, which again is very important for this kind of supplier facing work.
Yeah. Okay. I want to go deeper on the leadership. So what do you think sets apart like good leadership versus great leadership?
So many things. I do think that one of the most effective things leaders can do, I think we've talked about a couple things, right? Continuous learning, being able to fulfill your commitments, building trust, open communication. I think all of those are very foundational things that leaders need. But I also think today's leader needs to be pretty comfortable with feedback. And that feedback is both formal feedback, sometimes it's going to be depending on the company size, if there's a feedback process or that kind of thing. But then also when I think to, feedback that I've gotten along the way, some of the most meaningful feedback is on the spot, right? So we come out of a meeting and, hey, openly, I asked for a lot of feedback those days too, is like, how do you think I answered that question? Do you think that I, answered what it was they were asking, And I had some folks alongside me those days that were very comfortable giving open feedback. And I feel that is, very critical in today's work that, before you talk to someone else about someone else's feedback, give them the gift of feedback directly, right? So, how do we use every opportunity there to be able to say, maybe next time try this or try that. I think, that kind of the people skills around those, constructive moments are super important.
Yeah. I really love that. I think also you don't need to wait a year, right? Or if it's 6 months where you have your review and saying, oh,
yes.
remember 4 months ago when you said this? You answered this, right?
Exactly. And I think that, openly, those moments that I had that kind of like informal mentorship by some of my peers and leaders, those are the reels that play in my mind a decade later. It's so impactful. So when I interact with folks that are earlier in their career or established, but certainly like I think about it when I'm mentoring or doing things in the Spark program is, how do we instill that interest of folks of also soliciting feedback and feeling, it is uncomfortable. It's a bit vulnerable, right? But it also is like, those are, strike while the iron is hot. There's no better time to get feedback than right in the moment. So those micro moments really mean a lot. And I think I've just tried to really be more conscious of that and what impact, because of my own experience, that's really shaped my opinions.
Yeah. But I think that's the most honest and the best way, right? If you use your own experience.
Yes.
And you build the trust within your team as well when you have that kind of approach.
Absolutely. I hope so. Absolutely.
No, I think. So I want to ask as well, so that's like a newcomer, right? Because there's new talent coming in. We can see it. It's awesome. What kind of advice would you want to give like somebody that's new to the industry?
Yeah. It's of course it sounds cheesy. There's like no way that it won't. But early in my career, I wish that I had understood that being myself was my value.
Yeah.
I was pretty focused on emulating characteristics that leaders had, right? Instead of recognizing my own. And it took a couple pivots and some really honest feedback for me to recognize that there was a reason I was in the room, right? There was a reason, and that was to learn, but also ask questions and share my perspective, even if I didn't have the experience. And I think, that it comes with confidence too. It's easy for me to say this, but, early in my career, I really wish I would have emulated that a bit more, right? And I would love for folks that are coming into the industry to have that, like, that feeling of I'm welcome here, I'm valued, and my different perspective is so valuable as part of the conversation.
Yeah.
It never stops being important.
No, it is. And I think you also have to be, ask the questions, right? Even though you sit there and if you're like that newcomer, you're like, I ask it. But I'm pretty sure sometimes there's somebody in the room that's been there for some time. Maybe they have the answer and will actually be great to hear, somebody else answering it and saying, oh yeah, that's actually the question and the answer, right?
Right. And I think that's where it starts, helps you build trust and, collaboration. And it is a little vulnerable, but I just, I'd love to see more and more of that because, leading in the future is all about perspectives, right? And we can't get perspectives fast enough to be able to, get ahead of the curve of what's next. So I think that's just going to be super critical for us over the upcoming decade or so is to be able to, quickly be intuitive enough to know what the next trend is and be able to answer those questions before they come to us.
Yeah. Or call me when you know about the future. No.
Will do.
If you're like in another time zone, you're a little bit ahead of me, right? So what's happening?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I have one more here, and then this is a little bit tough one because I want to ask you, how do you know if you are a good leader?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I think for me, number one is when people feel supported and they feel they're developing, right? To me, there's no greater compliment, I guess. I hate to say that because it's like, it's not about me, it's about them, But when they feel like they're running fast and doing their thing. And, I had a teammate say like, I think this was my best EDS. And I was like, yes, that's wonderful news. Like that makes me feel so happy for you. So to me, I think it's about, folks feeling supported and feeling like they're growing.
Yeah. No, I like that. It's not about you. It's about who's around you, right? That you make sure you actually are showing them the right way. And if you do that, right, they're going to succeed. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Last question here. So if you have to look at yourself, right, and give you an advice, if you look back, right, and say, okay, let me give Heather, I need to give myself an advice like 10 or 15 years ago. What kind of advice would that be?
I think it kind of goes back to the question or the comment around being yourself and recognizing your value. I would say trust your gut. I guess 15 years ago, I would have said go for the electronic components industry because it has been such a great fit. But that's not probably what you're looking for. But I think openly, I was in a manufacturing environment and I was in the aftermarket parts division for a major manufacturer of heavy duty trucks and school buses. And at that time, I thought, I really would like to get closer to e-commerce and I'd like to get closer to international work, right? Being able to work with global teams and whatnot. And that's why this industry was such a great fit. Both of those have been achieved tenfold. I'm right in the thick of it in some really exciting work and where we're headed. So I think that from, career path, that definitely was right in line. But then I think, more and more as I chatted through like kind of being yourself, I think I've been able to show up as my own person and not necessarily as much as emulating someone else's, definition of leadership. And I think the more comfortable I've gotten with that over time has allowed me to be more effective.
Yeah, I love that. So thank you so much for being on. I really love what you're saying, being yourself. I think that's and recognize that is so important, right? And look for the trends. I think, I don't think I've heard, maybe I have heard it before, but you're saying, right, how you talk to distributors within DigiKey, right? Having to be sure you're sharing these trends of what's happening and going on so you can actually transform the strategy or the long term, bringing in the data, right? Connecting everything. I really love that approach. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I had a great time chatting with you as always.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I love that you're here. And as you can hear, I have a passion for this podcast. So I want to make sure that you're staying in the loop. Please check out leadershipmanufacturing.com. We have a newsletter there. Sign up for it so you are in the loop. And as well, make sure that you check out our YouTube channel, which is called Leadership in Manufacturing. Make sure you subscribe because then you will get a lot more information and great details to become this much better leader. So check it out. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well, if that's where you want to scroll with your fingers. So check it out. We're like all over. But remember, stay curious, keep learning.